Okay, welcome back, everyone. My name's Charlsie Baldwin. I'm one of the co founders here at Twin Legacy Solutions. Our podcast here, the Futureproof Leader, brings on guests from really around the United States and different types of industries to talk about leadership and AI. Today, we have another exciting CEO and founder of a large organization. His name is Bill Becker, and he's the CEO and founder of Records Force. We're going to dive in and learn all about Records Force and what you do here in a moment. But thanks so much for joining. I'm really excited just to get your perspective on change management and leadership and how kind of automation has really impacted your business specifically. You have a pretty exciting story that I think our guests are really going to enjoy. So thank you for joining.
Oh, thanks, Charles. It's great to be here. I'm excited to talk about what we're working on.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a lot too. I think again, I really love the journey that you already kind of shared with me. I think our viewers are going to get a lot out of that. So before we kick it off and I jump into some questions, can you just kind of give us your background and what Records Force is all about?
Sure. Thanks. Yep. Bill Becker, CEO and founder of Records Force, started the company about 26 years ago out of my basement. And it was after having a career in the microfilm industry and kind of on a journey of space and time to take you way back. The industry that I'm in today really came out of taking paper and putting it on microfilm. And just in my time and my career, we've gone from that to what we'll talk about some today, which is how artificial intelligence and automation are affecting how we do our work of processing information that's coming in for companies on a daily basis. Our company, Records Force, specializes in helping companies go paperless and traditionally paper-based processes. So we focus on things like digital mailroom outsourcing and doing large one-time projects to help companies convert giant back files of paper or existing catalogs of literature to digital so they can be used in new ways.
A lot. I love it. And I know you and I had already kind of talked about how that is such like a critical component of businesses, opening the mail, right? Like that's such an important thing that sometimes you have to hire a lot of people to do sometimes and it doesn't always get done the right way. So
I'm not the most exciting guy at the cocktail party when we start talking about, what we do for work because it sounds so mundane. But when you think
no.
about it, information is the bloodstream of most companies. And
Yeah.
where we interact with that is helping companies go from that old way of doing business where it was on paper to new ways. And what's funny is some of the new ways that we do things introduce their own problems that our industry still solves, even though it's not a paper-based problem. And some examples of that are things like managing attachments in your inbox for a big company that's receiving emails every day with invoices attached. And you've got to process
Hmm.
3,000 invoices from an inbox to your ERP. That's just as bad as getting 3,000 envelopes in the mail, but it's still
Hmm.
a process of just taking something that's coming inbound, normalizing it, digitizing it, and delivering it to the customer the way they need it. And that
Hmm.
turns out to be important in just about every business somewhere in their organization. There's some process that's slowed down because someone's got a piece of paper in their hand instead of something running through their network, and through a digital
Hmm.
system.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've been around, your business has been around for over 25 years. When did you first realize that AI wasn't just going to be a trend, but it was something that was really fundamentally going to force you to have to evolve?
Yeah, our industry had some past, really hyped technologies that were supposed to revolutionize our industry. OCR was the first one, optical character recognition, where you could take a scanned image of a page and convert it into text. And everyone said, "Oh, this is gonna change everything." Well, those early OCR engines produced as many problems as they helped solve because they really weren't ready for the market. And so when AI first came out, there was a lot of hype around it, but when we looked at actually using it, it had the same types of flaws that early OCR had, and that it was very interesting, but it was more of a curiosity than a real production level tool. And so we really watched with anticipation and optimism, but with some skepticism about what AI was truly capable of. But honestly, in the last year, what we've seen is the technology is delivering on the types of promises that we were listening to 5 years ago very
Mhm.
skeptically, and today are seeing real data, the support that AI is doing the kind of work that we imagined it could do. And in our industry, if we take a piece of mail from the mailroom and digitize it, we've got to get that to the right person in the organization. So the first thing we need to know is, well, what is this piece of mail? And then who is it supposed to go to in the business? And before AI, that was a mostly human process of triage. someone would look at the document and say, oh, that's an invoice. That goes to accounts payable. This is a claim that goes to the claims department. And today we can have an AI look at that document, and through a set of prompts, it can determine this is an invoice or this is a claim. And without any human intervention, it can determine where that document needs to go in the organization. So that's a
Mhm.
huge shift, because that was, if you think about it in our business, that could be half the work we do, is lifting that data, determine, how to route that document, or pulling data that drives some business process. So that same invoice, great, I know it's an invoice, it gets to accounting. How does the data on that invoice get into my ERP? And that was first, it was something you just typed it in, sometimes from a piece of paper or from an email. And then maybe you had a tool like OCR where you could get the data lifted off of it and use some software that might guess, oh, the invoice number, that's the date. Today you can ask the AI to just give you all of the pairs of data on that document, and it'll tell you this is the invoice number, this is the PO number, this is the vendor. And it does it with a much higher degree of confidence than the old tools that we were using could do, and with a better sense of when it's right or wrong. In our industry, there's something called confidence, confidence level.
Mhm.
You let the automation do its work, and then it guesses like how well it thought it did. Like, I'm 90% confident I got this right.
Right.
And that allows you to not look at things that are very high confidence, so you can do a less quality control. Well, the AI is more intuitive about when it's right and wrong, but that also leads to the greatest weakness, which is the thing that we're always battling with any kind of automation, which is, okay, we've automated, but now there's a new type of problem to clean up. And how do
Mhm.
we make that scalable? With AI, it's a very different problem than with OCR, with the earlier technologies, because AI flat out hallucinates, and it'll produce a result that it's highly confident is right and is completely wrong. And in a world where we're responsible for the quality of the data we deliver, and
Right.
we're using automation to be more efficient, to save money, it's not a very good argument to the customer to say, hey, this is just what you need to live with because we're saving money by using AI. Now that doesn't really hit very well. So so we're responsible for cleaning up those issues. So figuring out how to predict when AI will hallucinate and then make changes before a customer will see those issues was a new type of problem that we had to figure out how to solve, because we don't control the AI. That's an
Right.
Amazon product, or that's a Microsoft product, or whoever, or whoever's AI that you're using. It's probably not something you developed yourself. And so when it's doing those hallucinations, it's like a black box. You put something in, something comes out, and that's what you get. You can't go
Mhm.
back to Amazon and show them the invoice and say, hey, this is
Right.
wrong. Can you guys fix your AI so it doesn't do this anymore? It has to see millions and millions of documents to figure out what those
Right.
patterns are. And if the patterns are very similar, sometimes it crosses those wires and gives you bad data. So
Mhm.
in our world, AI was initially something we were skeptical about, then something we started to adopt, and then we rapidly had to figure out how to solve the problems that it presented, which were
Mhm.
different from what we had seen,
Quality.
in prior disruptive technology in our industry.
Right. Solves one problem, creates a new one.
Yeah,
I know a lot of CEOs, and you're a pretty large organization. You have about 200 employees, correct?
correct. Yep.
Yeah. So, a lot of CEOs your size and smaller and even larger sometimes too, right? They are kind of stuck with adjusting to those changes that are needed, right? The current model they're doing today, it's still working, so why change it? How did you kind of get out of that mindset and disrupt your own business before the market forced you to?
I was kind of nerdy when I was young. I played video games when I was in high school, before PCs were a common thing for people to have. And that curiosity about new technology has been a gift pretty much through my whole career. As a company our size, we're fairly heavily invested in software development and technology. For one reason, I mean, if someone else is making your Kool-Aid, you're drinking their Kool-Aid. And I want to make the systems that drive our business. And so we've always been very technology forward in terms of our thinking about how to solve problems. There was a time in our industry where offshore data entry was a competitor to automation. So I can
Mhm.
get cheap labor, or I can try to automate the labor away, or maybe even combine the two. In our journey, it was at a time when there was an economic crisis going on in the country and people were losing their homes. And to me, it seemed like chasing cheap labor offshore was going to be a losing game in the long run, because you're going to have to keep moving to wherever the cheap place is. And there's always issues with doing work across cultural boundaries, especially with
Mhm.
sensitive things like data capture, where you wouldn't think about, oh, someone wrote their address ALBQ, and someone, that does that work in America will be like, oh, that's Albuquerque. But someone working in India or China may not have that intuition to
Mhm.
know. So there are
Right.
real limits. So we looked at that and said, well, let's try to beat cheap labor through automation and escape this chasing, where the best deal is for this. And that was something that really drove us in that direction of, all right, we're going to use automation. It's going to have problems. We need to be able clean up those problems very quickly. So let's build systems that combine these human and automation elements together. And so just my background, and then our CIO, Dave Brown, is a brilliant developer. He and I have worked together for almost 33 years now. So before RecordSource ever existed. And before we created the company, we had created something called the Online File Center. It was the first cloud-based document management system that we knew of at the time. And so, that kind of thinking of, well, where are things going to go? How do we meet clients' needs that they are not aware of yet, but we can see this.
Right.
And then can we be the ones that, on that sales call where the customer says, we get 10,000 customer service calls a month asking, did you get our documents yet? And we have no way to know that other than calling our vendor to say, did you get the document yet? I'm like, well, wouldn't it be nice if you had a portal that would let you see those documents moving through our process in real time? It was something that we hadn't been asked for, but we thought, if we're processing documents like this for companies in real time, we need to be transparent about what's coming through. And if
Mhm.
we could do that for them, that's going to give them more comfort and see that there's less risk in taking this outsourcing step. And so that's just, we've always applied technology in ways that enhances our customers' ability to work with us through transparency, or made us more efficient or more accurate. And
Mhm.
in the long run, that practice of iteration has just paid us back in spades, because now instead of chasing cheap labor or trying to pay my employees less, we're focused on how much can flow through our operation without any humans being involved. And that leaves the remaining jobs are really more rewarding jobs than the ones where someone was doing data entry. Now they're monitoring
Right.
AI prompts, and our ability to scale as a company has meant that these innovations haven't led to fewer jobs. They've led to our ability to serve bigger, better clients.
Mhm. It sounds like it really enhanced your team, not replaced
Oh,
it. Yeah.
yeah, it wasn't something that I was doing intentionally because I was like, this is important for the business. It was just something I enjoyed. And then later was like, wow, this was really good that we had
Yeah.
this influence in the business that kept us up to speed on technology, where some of my peer competitors came out of the microfilm industry and never really adapted their thinking to the new world. And we live
Mhm.
in a distinctly different environment today than we did 30 years ago.
I know, even a year ago.
Yeah, yeah, I
The
know.
the
And
the
that's the
rate
scary
is
part. Yeah, yeah, 6 months ago.
I know, right? So in terms of what's harder, do you think that with change management around this, was it creating that strategy or was it getting the buy-in from the people who are executing it every day?
I think AI on its own it can be intimidating for people. And so, like, in terms of trying to introduce a disruptor to the business, the people who are hesitant to do that are hesitant because they are fearful of the downsides of that technology. So the first thing I tried to do is just start demonstrating ways that I was using AI to make my job better or to be better at my job. And then I started challenging people on my management team, hey, here's something I did. Next week when we get together, I want you to show something that you've done. And now almost every week in my weekly check-ins with the management team, at least one or two team members are showing me what they've done with using, in conjunction with the use of AI to produce things either in a timeline that we never could have imagined prior to this, or with a depth of analysis and of data certainty that, a two-person team over a weekend couldn't have done, but 3 hours with Claude Code, and I've got an analysis that's much more thorough, and something I would have paid consultants, so much money that I might not have
Mhm.
ever done the research. So like we're getting access to information and deeper analysis that as a business our size, we just never could have touched. And by showing the team, here's how it's working for me, come back and show me how you can make it work for you. It wasn't like you need to do this. It was hey, this is really helpful. I'm really blown away by what I'm able to accomplish. I find a way to make this work because this is amazing.
Yeah.
And then in talking with my managers, they've done the same thing with their team. Say,
Mm.
where can we bring these tools to bear? And it's harder to push it down to frontline folks who are, doing
Mhm.
the work of scanning documents or pulling staples. But every now and then, someone just has this aha moment where you're like, yep, we've been sitting with this problem for 20 years, and here's the solution, and it's going to take us, a day to implement.
Right.
Yeah, and now with AI, some of these things that were just out of the price range or would take so
Yep.
long, it would be outside of our ability to make them a priority, are starting to become available. A real quick example, we monitor all of the automated systems that run our business. Must be 300 or 400 automated systems that are running at all times.
Oh,
Those systems crash. They're just
yeah.
systems. When they crash, someone needs to know to get them kicked back up. Well, we had these alerts that would kick off when the systems had a hiccup. The people who got those alerts were getting 300 alerts a day, and they just
Mhm.
stopped being sensitive to the alerts.
Yeah.
because they didn't know, out of these 300, there's like two that are really important. So we wanted to have this tool that would look at the alerts that were coming up and analyze them and only show us the really important ones. And the tool to do that through our third party vendor was going to be, it was pretty expensive. It was like, I don't know, $8,000 or $9,000 to get it set up. And so we're like, all right, well, maybe we'll do that. We'll look at the budget. And then in this week's check-in, my CIO goes, hey, I screwed around over the weekend and I was able to do this. Let me show you what it does. And he's clicking through our prioritized alerts, and the ones, it packages them all up and sends a once a day summary of the alerts that are, structured by priority. So something that was not being looked at anymore because humans don't have
Mhm.
the capacity to stay vigilant in the lack
Right.
of a threat, right? If there's nothing
Yep.
threatening, I just can't stay focused on it. AI doesn't have that problem. It's like I can look at this forever. So
Yeah.
so it's also that makes the job better for the humans because we've asked them to do something that was really impossible and that they eventually would fail at. And
Right.
that's not a great way to set people up in a job. The best case scenario is you only fail.
I
But
love how, I mean, just like leading from the top down, I think is huge with AI adoption. We
yeah,
we talk to a lot of different That's part of what we do is we help with AI adoption. And if it doesn't start at the top, it is not going to trickle down the way that you need it to. And I think the way that you kind of almost like made it a homework assignment, like you guys take a week, come back
yeah,
and tell me something cool that you were able to do with it. I love that idea. I think it's a fun way to kind of get your feet wet in it and just dabble with no pressure, right? It's not
I heard a
tied to a
quote about
specific project.
yeah, I heard a quote about sales that resonates with this conversation. It was that sales is not manipulation, or it's not really convincing people of something. It's
Yeah.
a transfer of enthusiasm from one person to another. And
Yep.
when you think about something like getting people to use AI, if they're afraid, it's like I don't want to be the one that brings this up. It's like, well, if I bring my enthusiasm to the room for it, now it's not me telling you. It's I'm just excited about it. And if you catch that
Mhm.
excitement, you're going to be curious enough to figure out, well, Bill's doing it. Maybe there's something to it. So it's
Mhm.
really more about making it a contagious idea, and making it safe for people to take chances, and then creating a place for people to share their successes, so that the whole room gets a sense of, oh, okay, yeah, this is, it's not just Bill, it's real. Because
Mhm.
CEOs, we go off in our own direction sometimes, and people can be skeptical of whether we're in the clouds or if our feet are on the ground. So it's important to sometimes bring in someone from operations because see, they did it too. So,
I love it. You said something about, being able to basically, like, fail at it, right? Like,
yeah,
being able to just see what you could come up with, and it's okay if it results in nothing, like, it's just about getting in there and experimenting with it because that's just gonna start it's a waterfall effect, it's just gonna
yeah,
continue, so
yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, I love it. It sounds like your team is really innovative and just open to change.
Yeah.
Has that ever not been the case? Have you ever had to like really kind of push hard through this change management?
All companies go through, I think, evolutions as the CEO evolves as a leader. And back in 2007, prior to that, I didn't really have a system for running the business, and we got to this place where we just couldn't grow any further. We just kept bumping along kind of the same speed. And I realized I was the problem. I needed to get some coaching and adapt the way that I was leading the business. So prior to that, we had those kinds of problems where I felt like I couldn't get the team to come with me on certain
Mhm.
ideas or journeys. And I realized it was, that I wasn't really doing my job correctly in a way that would create meaning for what I was suggesting to the team. I was like, this seems like something Bill wants, but I don't see how it's going to help us. So now, being more inclusive as a leader and having that mindset naturally then leads to teams that trust each other more. There's this Five Dysfunctions of the Team is a great book that,
Mhm.
describes how teams end up failing. And it's mostly around trust and honesty. And you can't have honesty unless people trust each other. And that's you got to demonstrate that every day in your actions. It's not something you just put on a poster and say, yeah, we trust each other. And then that really, it gets infused in the staff, and then that overflows into your customers. Customers can sense when people trust each other. These Zoom
Mhm.
calls lay us all bare. They really expose some of the weaknesses in organizations, and where we're touching the information flow and the customer's not talking to each other about what they want. It shows up in those Zoom calls, and you can tell the organizations that are being run really
Yep,
well versus the ones that aren't, just based on what goes on in those brief interactions. So
absolutely.
we're a good team. We've always liked iterating. Everyone that works for me is homegrown. There's someone
Yeah.
who came up through the business, so they know how the company works and where they came from and what it takes to get the work done on the front end. This is hard work. It's real physical work, which has fallen out of popularity somehow. To do real work. But if you like getting stuff checked off a list every day, that scratches an itch for you. Records Force is a special place for a lot of people because we get a lot of work done, and you can see it every day. So it's satisfying.
I love that.
Yeah.
I like that you you shared that and you're just transparent about it, that you yourself as a CEO went and got coaching. I think
Oh,
that,
yeah.
I think sometimes ego can get in the way of that a little bit, but I think no matter what level you're at, there's a coaching and mentorship that can help you to not become stagnant and get to that next level, or not to become complacent with the level. Even if you're not trying to get to the next level, it's about not being complacent and having that tunnel vision, which is easy to get when you're in one position for a long time.
You know, it's lonely at the top. A lot of CEOs, if they were entrepreneurs, they come from a more rogue mentality and they're not used to asking for help as much. It's actually something I was thinking about before our conversation today. It was like, in leadership, often leaders, they lead from the gut and they don't always they're not always the most inclusive thinkers. AI is actually a real help to people like that because it's a safe place where you can get feedback and not feel like your team is skeptical of you or coming back with a no. And so I
Yeah.
think in many ways, like they talk about AI as a therapist, but I think for leaders, it's
Mhm.
it's another voice that's less threatening. I fear sometimes the advice we're getting is recursive, that you're just getting back what you're putting in many cases.
Right.
So you can get kind of in a place where you don't have a great idea, but the AI is just totally cheerleading you. Got to be
Yeah.
careful about that. But in a place to just talk about what's going on in the organization and get feedback, I find it can often help frame a conversation or clarify an idea that I'm working on in a way that I can then take back to the team much more effectively. So it's
Mhm.
a good collaborative tool for lone leaders who don't have a great collaborative style to at least add one person, if it's maybe an automated or artificial person, but adding
Sure.
some voice to that, so they're getting some kind of feedback. That's helpful because a lot of them operate in total silence.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more, and I do agree the way that you prompt it could definitely influence the
Oh,
direction it's gonna steer you, so you have to be aware of your own
yeah,
biases of voice and all that, but, it's a good sounding board. I mean, I
yeah,
can relate to that personally and professionally. Of course, professionally I use it, but even personally when trying to, like, navigate parenting and making big decisions, right? Like, I want a sounding board of what
yeah.
are some things I might not be thinking of with this big decision. So, yeah, it's nice to have, and you get faster advice than, trying to schedule therapy. Love it. Well, as we start to wrap up here, I'd love just your perspective on, looking back now, what advice would you give to either a new business owner, a founder, a small business who knows that change is necessary, but maybe they're just really like hesitant to make that change?
Yeah, I mean, well, the first thing is most CEOs didn't go to school to be CEOs, right? They're in the job by happenstance. They either started the company or they worked their way up to that role, but they probably never studied the art of CEOing. And I hadn't either. I'd come through a sales channel. I ran the company like a sales department for quite a while, more reactive than creatively solving problems, not really driving the company to improve, just driving it to react to feedback. And
Mhm.
that was terrible for everyone. And until I adopted a framework, there's EOS and there's like, the gazelles, there's these frameworks for running businesses that help you create rhythms and practices and habits that support your job as a CEO in a way that probably no one ever sat you down and said, this is how you do the job. So the
Mhm.
first thing I would do is, we talked about getting a coach. I would strongly suggest people get a coach that's grounded in some type of framework that fits for your organization. There's a lot of great companies out there that can help you with that. And then once you've got that coaching, then you realize very quickly you are the speed limit for your business, right?
Mhm.
Everything that slows down is probably slowing down because it's running through you. And the more quickly that you can empower your company to take on, those responsibilities through effective, responsible delegation, then the easier and more enjoyable your life and your job gets, and the happier and more effective your company becomes. It was truly freeing for me when I made that transition from being a reactive, sales oriented CEO to a more
Yeah.
thoughtful, more creative, coming at problems proactively, trying to, to not just let fires burn. That type of leader. I noticed the shift in my company. We had almost 100% turnover in staff in a 3-year period
Wow.
when
Wow.
we made that transition because frankly, the folks who liked to be on the bus where you
Yeah.
didn't have to change and there wasn't a lot of real effective leadership didn't survive when we implemented those new policies and
Mhm.
practices. But the company that came out of that transition was so much stronger and
Yeah.
capable of growth in a way that the old company just never would have been. And that was because I changed. And that was what had to change. And any leader that finds themselves feeling stuck or in a rut, they probably need to look in the mirror and say, how am I being the speed bump here? Because I know that if it's not going as fast as I want, it's probably because I'm slowing it down.
Mhm. That kinda reminds me of the 80/20 rule, right? 80% of, right, your time that you're the things that are absorbing your thoughts, your time,
Yeah.
usually those are the things that you can either eliminate altogether or delegate, and
Yeah.
it sounds like I mean, that's a ton of turnover, that's a big change, and that must have been a scary time, but it obviously worked out well for you.
Yeah. The fear of what was walking out, the knowledge that was leaving us, was paralyzing at times. But then if you're trying to create an intentional culture and you hold on to people who are actively working against your culture, but you keep them because they have special knowledge or special talents, what you're really saying is, I value these special talents more than I value the culture. And I'm demonstrating it by keeping this person here, even though everyone can clearly see how much they're damaging the culture,
Right.
right? And so if you want to ruin a company, just let a bad person stay there and talk about how you want things to be better, and everyone's going to look at you and look at them and go, yeah, you can say whatever you want, but until
Mm,
you take action, it's all talk. And so, yeah,
yeah.
that was a tough transition, one that I never would have wished on us or anyone else. But once it was over, it had taught me an enormous amount about fear and about, holding back on doing the right thing out of a scarcity mindset. And
Mhm,
once we started making those decisions, that I like to sleep well at night. I don't like to disrupt people's lives unnecessarily,
mhm.
and having turnover like that clearly is a lot of disruption. But we did, we're a very thoughtful company, and today now we're able to, if we need to make changes, be much more thoughtful and prescriptive about how we do it. So, yeah.
I love it. I mean, that's a really impressive journey that you've been through. So,
Hey,
Bill, it's been great having you on our podcast here today. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. You have a lot of wisdom and experience, and you've been extremely successful in your career and with your business. And we really appreciate you taking the time. Thank you.
thanks, Charlesy. It was a real joy to be on the show. Take care.